welcome to Open Up, which is a podcast for open discussions around inclusive design, providing insights on disability and age inclusion to level up. I'm Juliette Burton and I'm your host. I am a mental health ambassador, an ambassador for Rethink Mental Illness. I'm a comedian, a writer and performer, as well as a journalist. And I'm very honoured to be the host of this podcast with Open Inclusion. This podcast is meant to be a positive, practical and informed, diverse set of voices to help people more deeply understand and more confidently act to reduce exclusion wherever we can. This podcast is not about admiring the problem. This is about engendering positive change. So this podcast is for you if you want to be a part of the solution. So this week's episode is with our wonderful guest, Pinar Guvenc, leader of SOUR Studios, which we at Open see as one of the leading inclusive design organisations working to make beautiful disability inclusive products. And Pinar is partner at SOUR, which is an international award-winning hybrid design studio with the mission to address social and urban problems, where she leads business and design strategy. Now, Open is very proud to partner with SOUR Studios, and we are working on a project at the moment with them for a consumer goods company, which is very exciting. And she's based in New York, in Brooklyn Navy Yards, and the organisation has offices not only in New York, but also Istanbul and projects worldwide. She's spearheaded inclusive design in architectural design and product design, and particularly is well known and highly regarded for the work that she did with Degree Ink deodorant, which is an inclusive design deodorant from Unilever, put out last year. Pinar, it's also, this is the thing that's making me a little bit nervous and hot under the collar, is that Pinar is also host of the podcast What's Wrong With, and that is a series of discussions with progress makers and experts to diagnose problems in industries and find solutions and raise awareness to the general public. So Pinar, I hope that my podcast hosting skills will pass your scrutiny today. But thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And I'm way more of an amateur host, so thank you. I feel honored to be with a professional today.
Well, let's see how we get on. It's really just chatting, and I'm definitely a professional chatter. But I'd love to get to know you. So let's kick off with our first question, which is, what does inclusive design and innovation mean to you?
An amazing question, because I don't think we really do a deep dive into what do these things mean to us in general. And I think we often hear innovation coupled with, technology, science, engineering, like more often than other things. Whereas I do see innovation as, discoveries or opportunities in finding the connective tissue between two concepts or creating a feedback loop in a system. So really finding those opportunities to make differences, maybe quick wins or maybe just a quick thought, but really those like interventions that can like change and move the needle. And for us to achieve that, I can't think of any other way but than to do inclusive design. In the end, inclusive design means designing for differences, and inherently it includes diverse opinions, experiences, backgrounds, expertise, which is what's needed to find those opportunities and interventions that can actually create meaningful, innovative solutions. So they go very much hand in hand for me, and I can't really think of one without the other.
It almost sounds like you're saying that inclusive design is kind of at the core of humanity because it connects our humanity. Is that kind of what you're saying? It connects everything. It's the connective tissue for us to really be able to innovate and solve problems. Which is what humans as a species needed to do to survive from the earliest days. So
yeah, forever. Yeah. We're inherently, we survived as a species because of our ability to collaborate with people that we don't necessarily personally know, right? And I think we do practice collaborations, but they're not always inclusive collaborations. And in order for us to really innovate and find sustainable solutions, we have to really perfect the way we collaborate through inclusive design.
So I know that prior to working with SOUR Studios, you co-founded quite a few different ventures, which you helped to set up and grow those ventures through achieving international recognition and funding and lots of different areas, but specifically product design and architectural design. So I suppose with that in mind, why do you think we as a society, and we have just touched upon it in a more philosophical way, but in a more practical way, why do you think we as a society need inclusive design and innovation?
I mean, we have quite many problems in the world, right? We have enough body of problems that none of us can really address or find solutions for in silos. So we already are looking for a broader collaboration for us to be able to tackle these challenges for our own future selves and the globe's future, really. And when we talk about sustainability, we have to consider solutions that sustain in the long run for people and the planet, if we really want to be able to address the problems and find sustainable solutions for them. So when we say people and the planet, there is no way we can come up with that without inclusive design. We have to recognize our differences and design inclusively for those differences for any solution to sustain. So in that sense, I see it as a vessel really for us to be able to address the world's problems, which there are quite many and quite urgent of them, together and collaboratively.
So again, I guess looking back at what we were saying a minute ago about the evolution of the species, the survival of our species, one of the most prominent and immediate threats is maybe not a bear jumping out at us or a saber-toothed tiger who might wipe us out, but it's climate change. So sustainability is a part of this evolution, the survival of our species. And in order to do that, we need to keep learning from our differences in order to move forward.
Definitely. And I think, pandemic was a perfect case example of what we are able to achieve in the moment of crisis. I think to your point, climate change does not get the immediate urgency which a global health crisis did, because we saw the immediate results in person, day to day. But if we don't also treat it as a crisis, we are, we are going towards a future where we will see more and more of those urgencies on our day to day. And so we already, a few of the silver linings, I guess, in the pandemic, was that we already saw more interest towards collaboration. We already started to see even more appreciation towards inclusion and how inclusion can be more powerful in creating sustainable outcomes. So we see that, in the moment of crisis, we recognize these, and that recognition should not wear off when the urgency of the problem sort of fades away a little bit. So I think we have to recognize, in addition to climate change, we have many other social issues, systemic issues that we need to address. And for all of those, we need to work collaboratively in an inclusive manner.
Are there any of those that you're specifically most interested in yourself? And you said we have many issues that we need to look at. Is there any that are top priority for you?
I think as a mission-led studio, when we say social and urban problems, that already encompasses a lot. And when we say social, a lot of it relate to systemic issues or I guess design problems that impact our social lives. But also, I think in terms of environmental issues that we're seeing, we study more the ones that relate to our cities and urban settings where more humans inhabit. So we basically, what we do on a day-to-day is really trying to understand the underlying reasons of the problems we're seeing today, so that we can create more meaningful solutions. And those discoveries and finding underlying reasons does not happen by us just doing our research in our own silo. We have to expose ourselves to people and to different environments and have very diverse conversations to be able to dig up those meaningful insights that will inform design solutions.
I love what you have to say there, because to me, what I'm hearing you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's something of the personal in the societal, like that you have to examine yourself and your own background, your own intrinsic motivations, in order to then channel it into the solution that you're working as part of a team to find, to discover. Does that sound?
100%. We all have our own positionalities, right? We all come to the table with our own experiences, biases, prejudices, conscious or unconscious, right? So that already is present. And therefore, we need to ensure that none of those dominate a solution by creating an inclusive and diverse setting. It's really holding ourselves accountable in the process, and getting not only a self-check, but also a realization and discovery that opens the way to innovation we were talking about. So in that sense, it's very common sense. But, as you say, we know, like, there's a saying, not it may be common sense, but it's not common practice. But hopefully, and we're seeing more and more the appreciation towards that. We just need to recognize that representation is not necessarily inclusion. Representation really matters. People have to be represented, I guess, publicly, at the table, in projects. But inclusion is, I think we achieve inclusion when we really have partnerships and not just representation throughout projects and whatever we're trying to do. So there's no way we can say, like, we're done, we did it, we're inclusive. I think it's always like growing, and we have to recognize that.
Yeah, representation can be performative in some cases, but the only way that we'll truly know ourselves is by learning from others about the differences. Like, if I only ever learned from people who were exactly the same as me, who had exactly the same backgrounds, the same physical capacities, then I wouldn't actually progress my learning very far at all. The best chance that we can learn as much as we possibly can about what it means to be human is to learn from the complete different set of social backgrounds, physical backgrounds, and current present day experiences.
Exactly. And going back to, our history, right? Like the idea exchange, our curiosity, that's what also helped us thrive as a species. So I think we just need to, in that sense, stick to our nature.
Yeah, I love this. I'm hearing something about, like, the fact that our DNA, like, to have the strongest genetic capabilities of survival is to have diversification of genetics. So it's only the same with ideas, really. It's diversification of ideas, diversification of experiences. We're getting in. I love how quickly we've deep dived into some philosophical and psychological avenues there. But how about we go back to something a little bit more perhaps linear in its narrative? You have a wonderful background. We've touched on some of your professional achievements so far. I know that you are also part-time faculty at Parsons School of Design, MS in Strategic Design and Management Program, as well as an author and facilitator of the workshop series Strategic Marketing Collaborations at Pratt Centre for Community Development. And you also serve on the board of directors at Open Style Lab as somebody working for open inclusion on the Open Up podcast. I love the name there, Open Style, which is a non-profit organisation initiated at MIT with the purpose of making style accessible to people with disabilities, which I love because I love my style. You've done so much, Pinar. How did you get into this field? What drew you in?
I guess going back to curiosity and idea exchange. But I guess really, I come from, like, I studied engineering and finance, right? So total non-design world. And then I first, like in some of the past ventures I did, came in as a partner to help set up those companies, whereas they were more designer oriented, maybe in product design or clean tech design. So in that sense, I think that was my first, I guess, like exposure to design, which I really then kind of grew into more of a strategic position, finding myself in design and business strategy. But in terms of inclusive design, I think that was like very interesting, because when we first set up SOUR, and we were like three partners coming together and saying like, we want to do things that are more meaningful, purposeful, no tangibility in what we're saying, right? Like I think like we really defined our mission a year from then, saying like, we want to address problems, like we really want to create solutions in this world, or help create solutions in this world. Which then automatically, when we talk about social, urban, environmental problems, we are already talking about humans, right? So human centricity has been like part of the practice a lot, but where inclusive design really kind of like amplified its presence, I think we were at an event, a speaking engagement where I met Grace Jen, who's the present CEO of Open Style Lab. And at the time, it was not even a nonprofit. It was just a social service project out of MIT. And she was talking about accessibility in wearables. And, as a studio who does projects in, architecture, we have like baseline, ADA regulations for like access. We always recognize that they fall short, but there is some effort. And then hearing like a wearable point of view where there is nothing, like designers, company, we could get away with anything we wanted, right? Like we have no responsibility to anybody whatsoever. We just want to sell. And like hearing that was it was like a lightning strike for me, I think, because I was so shocked that as a person who is in like part of a design studio that is already mission led, appreciates human-centered design, understands accessibility in spaces, I did not think about inclusion in everyday everything around us, right? Like I was shocked in myself for not like thinking about like in wearables. And I grew up very close to my grandfather who passed away from ALS. And in the past, like the last few years in his life, I observed the, decline in his fine motor skills, gross motor skills. And I always associated that with, the implications of his diagnosis, and didn't see that as like, oh, like he is disabled by design, like things around him are disabling him. And so after like that spark happened, you can't really unthink or unsee that. And you kind of look at everything around you as an opportunity to rethink, to just make it more inclusive. And we need to understand also, inclusive design is not universal design. We're not necessarily talking about solutions that are just going to work for everybody. It may result in that, right? But like iPhones, but it also means that we really need to understand the people we're designing with, and find solutions that will address needs. And this is feasible in everything, in services, systems, products, language, campaigns, and I think really seeing a successful case example of this, like in practice for wearables, really opened my bandwidth of like, wait, we can just like rethink everything then. And which is when, Grace and I became very close. Then we decided to set up OSL as a nonprofit in New York and join the board. So I think that kind of also like that cross-learning and exposure to each other helped grow SOUR too, more so even in an inclusive design space, because I think it's important to have that understanding. As we can see, human-centric design sometimes is interpreted and practiced as consumer-centric design. So we're really just trying to like understand users to sell and not necessarily understand humans and their needs. So I think practicing more and more inclusive design also, stopped us from really becoming that. Because we really cared about co-creation. We really saw that the insights we can create in co-creation can create the best outcomes. So it was like a mix of like professional and personal journey that made us like even more passionate about what we do today. And we've been practicing it for, I guess we founded in 2015, 2016 now.
I love what you said there of the, it reminded me of a phrase that one of my friends who works in the disability field told me years ago, that just, it was like, yes, this is the sound bite that says everything. It's that my condition is my condition. What disables me is society's response to my condition. And something like wearables, and just to touch on briefly, for anyone who's listening who isn't part of the design world, how would you define wearables, the word wearables? What does that mean?
Clothing, accessories, garments, and in maybe a wheelchair user's case, it's also the wheelchair as an extension of the body. So really anything that goes on us and encloses our body. And yeah, I could, and it's to your point too, like it's once like that understanding happens, you can't shake it off too. Like you're an inclusive design advocate for life. And I was just shocked, like, yes, I did not think of wearables. Like it was very, and I was like, how did I not think of wearables? But I did, but it, like, we're so, I guess, like that's the coping mechanism again, going back to our species, right? Like we normalize things that are happening to us. And I think that we also find like it's more related to me than finding, like looking for like solutions externally. And I couldn't believe like that kind of social maybe, or like a public view of things, and that upbringing really shifted my mindset in that direction, that I didn't even think of that, until the age of whatever.
But wearables are just so like, it's your expression of who you are. It's your expression to the world of who you choose to be today. It's your expression to yourself, your communication to yourself about who you are. And I love using fashion in a fun way. And when I realized that some of my friends in the disability community were inhibited and couldn't enjoy that exploration and artistry and how you present and how you communicate to the world, it blew my mind. And I'm fascinated by this, because it's such a blind spot, or do you feel is it improving in society at the moment, making wearables inclusive?
Yes, I think if we were to like dial back, maybe not even 10 years, but 5-6 years ago, I think there was more and more representation, let's say, in people with disabilities being represented in fashion ads. So that like slowly started to happen, but it was more marketing campaigns. We weren't necessarily talking about like garment solutions. We weren't talking about shopping experiences, both physical and digital. We weren't talking about representation in a retail store, like the body forms we see in like stores, right? So that was very lagging. But I think in this past 2 years, we started to see more and more, and have been working on more and more projects that are really trying to find solutions in whether it's for the shopping experience, or whether it's in product innovation, but really trying to look for more authentic representation, rather than just like a marketing campaign. And I partially credit that to Gen Z, because I think, us millennials started to question things and started to ask the whys, but Gen Z really called for like companies to act on what they're saying that they were doing. We saw this in so many companies for so many years too. Like we have a sustainability agenda, and what does that sustainability agenda really means? And now all companies are really working towards being like carbon zero, or having like use of more like sustainable materials. So I think in that sense, we're seeing more action really in inclusive design, and that makes me very, very happy.
Yeah, it's, again, we said it in the introduction, there was such a phase of admiring the problem, or having these poster children like in the adverts and the marketing campaigns, but it was all marketing, and it wasn't actually necessarily looking deeper at how do you solve the problem. Okay, we're now aware that there are people out there with diverse physical bodies, or diverse neurodivergence. by celebrating with a hashtag, are we actually making the world more accessible to those people, or are we just using it as a marketing tool because it's a box ticking exercise and it hasn't been done before?
Exactly.
I'm going to come back to because I feel like we could talk all day about this. But what do you love about what you do? It sounds like it really fires you up. But is there one particular thing that really you adore it more than anything else?
I mean, I guess like the biggest problem I have in what I do is not having enough time, which means I just want to do more of it, which is a great sign. But first and foremost, I feel like I'm a mom, right? I'm a mom of a brilliant almost 4-year-old girl. And what I love about what I do is that I feel like when she grows up and when she asks me, what are you doing and why? I have a meaningful answer. I really don't like the term disrupting, or like all these like really fancy terminologies tech startups are kind of using, but I really feel like we're working towards like creating positive impact, help make change, make progress, really like try to push or like move the needle a little, even if it's a little bit, and recognizing this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And, if in one project we couldn't accomplish everything we wanted to do, we still take away our learnings from that and add it to the next one, and really, treat this as like a flag race almost, but making sure the goal for the future is to create more, better environments for ourselves, really. So I love that I'm able to say that comfortably to her. And I think being a mom made me feel very much more responsible of our future because it's her future. And I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing something not meaningful that would also, help her in the long run.
Even for using that kind of maternal answer, because I was asked this actually, fun enough, even earlier today, about what it is we do, like why what is the motivation, what keeps you going along these lines, and I think there's something about, even for people without children, it's if you are able to face up to your own inner child and your own inner sense of self, of why do we keep going along these lines when this isn't an easy option, the field that you're in, but you are channeling all of that maternal energy not only to your daughter but also to the community that you're serving, and I can hear and see a great deal of pride that you take in that. So that's what I'm observing in this conversation. So you mentioned there about change. I mean, we've been talking about change a lot, but is there one thing, if there was one thing that you could name that you could change, that could help progress disability inclusion, what would you say is the top priority in inclusive design moving forward?
Having people in the teams, really having people from community in the teams, because it's not like we're going to make the change for them. We need them we need the community to be at the decision-making table as partners in projects or companies that could really help bring in their voices and perspectives and lived experiences that will enable that change. So none of it is possible without actual inclusion of the community in the process. So if I could like change, boardrooms or project meetings, like I would just add in people from the community.
Sure. So like, I think there's like a phrase of representation as having somebody from your community around the table. Accessibility is making sure that there is a ramp to the table, in whatever metaphorical ramp that might be. Inclusivity is actually asking their opinion, and I've forgotten the name for the final layer, but it's actually listening to the answer is the next stage along, is and then responding to the answer. It's not just doing the representation. You've got to do more. We've got to do more. We can do more, and we are doing more. You are doing more with your work. I'm going to go on to our quickfire questions. I'm very excited because this is the first time that we've done this with any guest. So we've got a series of quickfire questions, and I don't know how brief we can be with the answers because I was trying to answer them myself earlier just as a test. It's like, this is going to be a challenge, Pinar. Are you ready for the challenge?
I'm ready. I'm just scared I'm going to give long answers too quick.
It's okay. We have time. There is time, and at least for this podcast, and maybe later on.
Quickly.
Okay, here we go. Quick fire questions. What is your pet peeve in design? How does it affect you, and how could we change it?
Oh my God, I have a few. I feel like I'm being more jaded as I get older, maybe. But
aren't we all?
First one that comes to my mind is when I observe sort of these like initiatives of like DEI and sustainability acting in silos and not interacting with one another. Like they have separate budgets, like there are separate meetings as if none of it matters for the other group, and not thinking of like sustainable solutions for the humans that inhabit the planet, but really treating them separately. That's one of my pet peeves, I guess. I'll keep it short.
Separation. I love it. It's great. That was fantastic. What is something someone has said to you about disability that has surprised you? And this could be positively or negatively.
Non-experts.
Non-experts. Can you define? I need you to define that a little bit more for me.
So, I'm not going to give any names, but in a co-creation panel that we're like putting together, like we're working on a project, the participation of non-experts, like when is that meeting going to happen? Like something like that came from one individual. And I think my reaction was like, who's the non-expert? Who is the non-expert in the team? I mean, it is opening up, but well, I'll bring some censorship there. But yes, these do happen. There's no such thing as a non-expert. It's just impossible also, regardless of ability, disability. Everybody knows something more than you, regardless of a topic. So anyway, but that was like really like I think my facial expression was sufficient, but
anyone who's listening to this and isn't watching this, please, I do recommend that you go onto YouTube and watch this particular episode because the facial expressions that Pinar is pulling are it's beautiful generally, but yeah, a facial expression.
I'm a very gestury person. Anybody who cannot see me, I'm very animated. So when I'm shocked or not pleased, you can guess what a face maybe could be like. My eyes pop, my jaw drops. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, let's see if we can get your jaw dropping in a positive way with the next question. When have you been delighted by an unexpected step forward in inclusivity?
I think really, we've been talking about inclusive design for almost 7 years now. But like in the last 2 years, I definitely started to see more and more diverse industries really showing interest. And, there's like amazing groups and collectives, and I guess like the list, like there's Valuable 500 list, like there's Diversity in Design Collective that it's coming together, but responses from energy companies to fashion companies to consumer goods companies. So seeing actually a momentum in this and interest, like diverse interest from different industries, that has been very exciting.
Brilliant. What questions have you asked that have opened up a new world for you? Is there a question that you have asked of somebody else that has opened up a whole new world for you?
I mean, I'm worried that the answer is too simple. I feel like it's just when you're around diverse people with like different experiences, just asking them, what do you think, actually opens up a lot for you. So I'm just going to say, what do you think? But you ask that to, a group that you have not exposed yourself to before. Ask that to that group, you will learn a lot.
Fantastic. I mean, you said it's a simple answer, but actually it opens up some more complicated and beautifully complicated answers if you ask that question. What questions would you like to be asked?
Oh,
Which is a bit of a tricky thing to ask towards the end of a podcast episode.
Yeah.
What questions do you wish I'd asked you, Pinar?
Well, Juliet. I guess I'm a chatty person, right? So like you can ask me like anything. But what is really frustrating sometimes, like when we're talking about maybe like new concepts to like some companies or individuals, the fact that they don't even want to hear more is very frustrating, right? Like that you show disinterest, or the immediate gut reaction is that, oh, this is going to cost more, or this is not like priority agenda. So they don't even ask the why. Why should we do this? Really, that's also a simple question. Why? And I think like it's such a loaded like answer we can give to that, like why human-centric design matters, why inclusive design matters, why do we need to think sustainability for both in consideration of human behavior for our planet. So it's so rich in its answer that, you know, just approaching a new something that you haven't practiced before with bias and not even asking the why is this important, I think that is frustrating. So I just want everybody to be, you know, stubborn toddlers and just ask a lot of whys to be.
I think I know quite a few stubborn toddlers, but possibly not in the inclusive design world, just generally. What would you say to a younger version of yourself regarding this topic, regarding inclusivity?
Oh my God. Expose yourself like early on, really, like get out of your comfort zone, meet more different people, talk to different people. I feel like, you know, my discovery that happened, like coming across Open Style Lab, and I was already like, this is 8 years ago, right? Like I could have had that discovery, I feel like in high school or college latest, if I was like more exposed. I think that's one of the silver linings of social media, right? That exposure can go really like in two different directions. But I also think it's enabling a generation that is much more aware and active about making meaningful change in this world. And I feel like my younger version was in a little bit of a bubble in that sense. So I would have told her to just expose herself more.
Fantastic. Can you name one mistake that has taught you more than any wins?
Oh my God.
I think I'm going to be honest. I think this might be my favorite question in the quickfire round.
This is not a quick question though. One mistake that taught me more. Oh my God. I feel like, you know, we practice failure. Like that's like inherited in our like process because we do iterative design, right? So we know I feel like, I'm going to give a more generic answer, but in every project, we fail in some of the design alternatives we're coming up with. But we fail because we are working with the communities and they're telling us what is the better direction to do this. So I learned so much in every project. And also to just like give a shout out, people with disabilities, whoever I worked with, are better innovators just because they have to like hack their everyday lives to make them accessible for themselves. So in that sense, I learned so much in any project that I'm involved in that has an inclusive design agenda. And we always fail in some of the options that we do, right? Like there is no quick win. There is good practice in enabling iterative design efficiently, but we're not going to get it right immediately. I think that's like what that has been one of the biggest concerns of corporations, really, like being afraid of doing something wrong and therefore not doing anything. We see how that served us, right? Clearly, it's not working for us. So we have to fail. We have to create safe to fail frameworks and processes so that we have the freedom to fail and make mistakes so we can learn from them. So it was a hard question for me because we always do it. Like we make mistakes and fail all the time, but we also, it's part of the process. We have to in order to learn. So I like every day I make mistakes and learn probably.
But this is such a huge fundamental thing that I think needs to change in society generally is embracing that. I know that we hear it again and again, more and more. I hope, at least in my life at the moment nowadays, that in order to, whether you win or you lose, you learn. You need to learn, and that's the way forward. Like, to be able to, there's no such thing as failure. It's success is just.
Yeah.
Repeated failures and learning from them, and the way to keep failing and not get to success is to beat yourself up for the failures, because that prevents you from learning. So anyway, that's my small thing is in order to release ourselves from the shame and guilt of I failed, I made a mistake. The mistakes are the only way we can learn.
1,000%. And this has to, be personally as such. This has to be like for corporations, like they have to, I think the missed opportunity there is like they really want to just like do it right. And if it doesn't work, oh, that failed, we're not doing that again. Instead of opening up to the conversation to communities and just say, why didn't it work? Like, how do we make it better? Right? Like inherently, if we made everything more co-creatively, there's no failure anyway. We're just working together to make a better future for us.
Brilliant. I can't wait to fail in some ways later on today and learn from it, and then tell you all about it, Pinar. Final 3 questions on the quickfire round. What's been the biggest catalyst to change in your life?
My daughter. That's an easy answer. I think she just made me so much more conscious of all my actions and much more considerate for the future.
What are you currently open to learning about?
Ooh. Everything. I mean, this is a tough question for a very curious person. Like I host a podcast talking to all sorts of experts in different fields and industries without knowing anything and going into them and just asking a lot of questions. So that's what I love to do. I'm open to learn about anything because I also feel like, and we talk about innovation, somebody else's common practice may very much be innovation in your field. And I love those discoveries and really doing analogous research and understanding like diverse opinions and expertise to really bring that, like learn from those and adapt it to our own like processes and day to day. So in that sense, I'm open to anything. Anybody can reach me out on any subject.
Wonderful. And the very final question, what would you tell someone wanting to step into this field for the first time?
I often feel like, I wish I had more real talk by people in like industry before I like got into the industry, sort of like helping me with how would I like navigate this space, right? So what I find, what we see often is that especially in projects that have not been done much before, like in inclusive design projects, we see more practice of participatory design in some fields, but it hasn't been practiced in so many industries. So it's new to many people at corporations too. So what we find is that client education and the corporate navigation are like the side projects that come with a project. So if you want to get into the space, you have to prepare for really educating people on why this matters. As well as really looking for mentorships, researching and trying to understand how you might navigate the space to realize what you're trying to achieve. We feel very responsible of setting up successful benchmarks in inclusive design just because it is practiced now more and more, and we're going to see more and more examples in like various industries. They have to be benchmarks that are actually authentic so that whoever is following this like movement, let's say, they don't necessarily try to do like quick wins or cheap outs, right? So we feel responsible in that. And I think in that sense, like we really try to educate, inform, co-create with clients as well so that they're on board. So there's shared ownership in the outcome. And really like trying to get as much support as we can, and how do we navigate, how do we make sure this project launches and people can see it and use it and interact with it. So really prepping for those and seeking mentorship in those for like people, especially in inclusive design space. 99.9% of the time are the nicest and most collaborative people I've ever met. So reach out to people in this space already for like mentorship or advice. Because it does come with like education and navigation, and you should be prepared for that, and you can't do it alone.
Wonderful. And I'm very grateful that you have helped me not be alone in this podcast today, and the wonderful listeners have learned from all your experience. So thank you so much for joining us. Pinar, if anyone wants to find out more about you, where can they go to follow you? Is there a website? Are there social media outlets? Where can they go?
I'm not very active on social media, except you can find me on LinkedIn. But you can follow SOUR on Instagram, I think TikTok, with what is SOUR handle. And I think on Twitter, this is SOUR. So we're giving the answers there. And our website is sour.studio. You can follow recent things that we've been doing through our journals or news.
Fantastic. And I'm very excited to learn more about the work with Open as well. And if you want to, listeners and viewers, follow Open Inclusion on Twitter, we are at Open for Access. And thank you so much to my guest, Pinar, for joining me this episode. Is there anything you want to say to our listeners before we sign off?
If you would like to chat about inclusive design or anything else, or if I can learn anything from you, please do reach out.
Fantastic.
And thank you for having me, Juliet. This was great.
Thank you for being here. I'm sad that it's coming to an end, but every ending is a new beginning. So I hope that this can begin a longer conversation in other various places when I'm next in New York, which I hope in my dreams tonight I'll be in New York. I'm currently in rainy London. Thank you so much for joining me, Pinar. And listeners, you can sign up for the series, and we will send you a reminder of when a new episode lands. If you've enjoyed this, please do tell people on social media. Please do tell us if you would like to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. Share it with your friends as well who may appreciate it also. And you can nominate people who you think we should talk to, or topics we should cover, or questions for our quickfire round. Who would you like to be on this podcast with me, Juliet Burton? You can let us know by emailing us contact@openinclusion.com. And do find me, Juliet Burton, on all of the socials. I'm at Juliet Burton on Twitter, Juliet_Burton on Instagram, and Juliet Burton Writer Performer on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us, Pinar. Thanks very much for joining us, listeners. Have a great day.